Today I'm talking with Barbara Minton, a psychologist and musician who creates music to heal your brain. We talk about how music and the brain dance together, why different genres hit us differently, and how we can use music to shift our mental and emotional state. Whether you're going through grief, pain, depression, just can't sleep, or are curious about how the brain and music work together, let's learn how to tune that neural instrument, calm that inner storm with Dr. Barbara Minton. I'd like to talk about music and the brain today. You're making music to help people change your brain in positive ways, like help them relax and get to sleep, etc. And you're studying about this. So I guess the first question is a very big, sweeping one, but how does music affect the brain in general for people? And I know, of course, there's different types of music and different kinds of people, but maybe we can just sort of start here and see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually the best place to start. And it's so interesting because our brains seem to be wired to listen to music. And some people even think that music existed before language existed, that it seems like a very natural communication channel for people. And we can't go back there and figure out, like, did music really exist before language? But certainly we've had chanting and drumming and all this kind of stuff. Music seems to be a natural emanation of our body and our brains. And really the question I asked is then, can we use music in a more sort of deliberate way to create wellness for ourselves? Because music can make us feel bad, right? Or if we're too hyped up and we listen to hyped up music, we feel even more hyped up. So I really asked the question, like, can we get more deliberate about how we use music? But the brain tries to mimic music. It's very interesting. Like, if you put a tempo in the brain, we have the neurons in our brain start to pace themselves to that tempo. Now, why is that? I have no idea. But it's just fascinating when you think about it, that external input starts to change what our brain does.
Have you looked at the differences between the brain that's making music and the one that's listening to it?
So no, I haven't. There's some beginning research in that area, really, of people trying to put electrodes on people's heads and see what, for example, orchestra players are doing while they're playing. And there is some preliminary data on this. For example, heart rate. If you're playing in an orchestra, your heart rate syncs up with the other musicians there, and your brain starts to sync up. So this like idea of like people like get into the flow, and you feel this. I mean, when I play with certain musicians, it's like we become one person. You get this internal feeling about this. The thing is, it's kind of hard to do EEG with people playing instruments. And the reason is when you put sensors on somebody's brain and they're moving around playing their violin or their bass or something like that, all that movement gets picked up by your head moving, and EEG works better when people are still. And so it's a little bit challenging. But there are people that are doing research in this area, and it's quite fascinating. And I think we'll find what we already know from the heart rate literature, or heart rate variability, if you know what that is. And that is when you're around someone and the music is happening, the music entrains you to the music, but it also entrains you to the person next to you, which is why do we like to go to concerts with other people and start jumping around, and we start to feel part of this crowd? Like, the crowd feeling is part of the beauty of live music. Did that answer your question, kind of?
I mean, questions are never fully answered, but that's the kind of fun part of this. I mean,
That's for
honestly,
sure.
I sometimes think that maybe instead of having this massive mind map of things to talk about, I should just come up with one question and let's just dig into that question for an hour. That's sort of maybe the better way to do it.
We could totally do that, but we just let it happen the way it wants to go.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned EEG, HRV, heart rate. These are some things that we can measure. So I guess the question is, what are you measuring when you're checking how people's brains are being affected by music, and how do you measure it?
Yeah, so let me just back up a little bit for people that don't know what EEG is, because it's not kind of the most common word we use every day. So our brains have cells in them called neurons, and those cells communicate with each other by making little electrical pulses. I mean, it's kind of amazing when you think about how electrical our body is. Usually we think of our body as being chemical, and our brains do communicate. The neurons in our brains do communicate using chemicals, but they also communicate by putting out these little electrical sparks. And these little electrical sparks go down different pathways of the brain. Well, we can actually put little tiny pieces of metal on your brain, and we just stick them on your scalp, and metal conducts electricity. And you put a little bit of gel in there that's salty gel, which conducts electricity, and you can actually pick up the electricity coming out of the brain. So it's really pretty cool. And it's non invasive, it doesn't hurt you, right? Because all this electricity is coming out of the top of your head. We can see that. And we can notice the first people that collected EEG, you can imagine like this was incredibly miraculous. The guy who first did this was a guy named Berger, and he had been in almost a life-threatening kind of wreck. This was in the early 1800s, so it was horse and carriages, and his sister, like miles away. So this is long before phones, cell phones, anything like that. At the same time this accident happened, she got this horrible, horrible feeling that something was wrong with her brother. And so he was trying to figure out how could this happen? Like, how could this communication over distance happen? And so he's the one who discovered EEG. He never figured out how that communication happened, but he was like, oh my gosh, there's these electrical pulses coming out of the brain. And then other people, as time went on, discovered like, wow, the brain fires in one pattern when it's having a seizure. It fires in a pattern when you're playing golf. It fires in a pattern when you're concentrating. It fires in a pattern when you're playing music. And all these different patterns are very precise and allow the brain to get its business done. What's super interesting to me about the music part of it and about being with other people is that it seems like something happens that the brain it's not just randomly picking up stuff. It wants to pulse to certain beats. It wants to react to certain human input. So we're biologically set up for the brain to process this external information in certain ways, which is just mind-boggling when you think about it. I was sitting outside writing the other day. I'm writing a chapter for this book I'm editing. And this street musician came by and started playing his saxophone. I put a post about it on Facebook because it was so, it was like immediately I could feel this. It was like, wow, it was this combination of this silky smoothness and this sort of edginess. And I could feel my brain moving into this state of like flow, but attention. It was like, this music just, and I'm like, oh man, this is perfect for writing. I'm like writing the most brilliant thing in the known universe, which I wasn't, but my brain immediately and my body immediately responded to that. And it's electrical signaling. It's creating that from the tempo and the timbre, which is the color, the type of sound that's being created, all this kind of stuff. It's really pretty mind-boggling when you think about it.
Yeah, I'm not religious, I don't think, but with good, real music, it's almost like this transcendent experience of where you're connecting to some deeper part of reality or some godly realm. And it makes sense why when people are making music, it does have this element of, whoa, I'm tapping into something beyond this world of what I see. And that's a really good feeling. Yeah. How do you feel when you're making music? There's this feeling that like, ooh, something important is going on here.
Totally. I mean, I'm really glad you went down this road because I think music, and maybe that's why people have this thing, like music was a tool that existed prior to language that connected us to some other state that we recognized as being really important. And it's funny because we actually had an email from somebody when we first put this album out, and the person was like, you need to rename this album because I had like a religious experience listening to it, and I connected to something where I felt like all my sins were forgiven. I could start my life anew. This is, can you imagine this powerful transformative state? It's pretty hard to just think about sitting in your living room watching, I don't know, sports on TV and going into that state. But with music, and I started wondering because for some people, does this create some sort of a portal, right? It opens a door to some other, we know there's energetic levels. There's all kinds of stuff out there we can't see, right? Like there's colors we can't see, obviously. And if you're colorblind or if you're color weak, you only see a certain amount of colors. We know there's sounds that are lower than what we can hear and sounds out there that are higher than what we can hear. We know through physics there's all these levels of energy that we're not physiologically perceiving, but they're out there. So, yeah, could music be a portal to some of this? It's quite interesting that some people very, very strongly have this experience. And I'll say for me, when I'm playing, I experience it more as an emotional state, but I think most musicians will say you get into this state of flow, what people call flow, where the music is just happening around you and you're sort of disembodied yourself. It's like I experience like I know I'm playing it, but it doesn't feel like I'm playing it. It's just happening and my fingers are going, but it's happening around me. It's a really weird, odd kind of experience to have. So I think you get into all kinds of altered states with music. Why do people listen to trance music? You know, has changes your experience of reality.
Yeah, well, on that note, there are many types of music. We got heavy metal, we got punk, we got rock, we got, unfortunately, K-pop and things like that.
Oh, no biases here, though.
No biases
Right?
here. But of course, everyone's gonna.
Country music. Come on,
I know.
country.
Well, there's a lot of music out there. Sorry, K-pop fans, but yeah. Anyway, the point is, there's different types of music, and I imagine different types or genres are affecting our brains differently, and there might not be a universal sweeping answer of this is how hip hop affects the brain, or this is how J-pop or country music affects the brain. But have you looked at some of these genres, or maybe you measured it with the EEG, or maybe just intuitively from your experience, you have this intuition that, oh, this is how this kind of music affects the brain versus this kind of music?
I love this question, and I love this question because it brings up my very favorite research article, which was not done by me, but it was done by some people who put people in an fMRI machine, and in fact, they played them like all these different genres of music, including some really super weird stuff. And then they had them also listening to a speech. So they had the comparison of speech versus all these music genres. And fMRI, if people don't know what that is, it's functional MRI. And most of us are familiar with the MRI, which is, you get an MRI of your knee to see if your cartilage is messed up, or you get an MRI of your brain to see if you have Alzheimer's. But fMRI is a little bit different. fMRI looks at where is the blood flowing in your brain. And the idea is that when your neurons activate, they use more blood because you need blood to get them going. And so, therefore, you can look at these patterns in an fMRI and see what the brain is doing. And in fact, when they played across these different genres, huge differences lit up among these different genres of music. So it's definitely true that different genres of music light up different parts of the brain. So some engage the emotional centers of the brain more, some engage the motor. Like if you've ever, you listen to music and your head starts to nod, or you tap your foot, or there's types of music that engage that. Now I'm going to say within that, so it's generally true, this is the case, but within that we have individual differences. And that's what's really, really fascinating to me, and hopefully to you and to your listeners too, because for us, mostly the question is, how do we use music for us to optimize our functioning? And If you're super, super anxious and you listen to calming music, a lot of the times that's not very satisfying. It's more irritating, right? So you're on hold and you're getting all like disgusted because you've been on hold for 30 minutes and they're playing a calming music and you're like, this is insulting. It's not calming me down. It's making me feel more agitated.
Yeah.
Um, so context matters and where your brain starts out matters. So if you're super sleepy, music is going to have one effect on you. If you're super amped, the same music will have a different effect on you. And heavy metal to me is really, really interesting because I've had some of my clients with PTSD say heavy metal calms them down. So most of us think of heavy metal as like really revving us up, right? Because it's intense. The timbres are, lots of distortion in the guitar, intense beats, lots of more kind of chaotic stuff going on. But think about it, if you have PTSD and your mind is like totally ruminating or you're being like completely inundated with all this horrible stuff that happened to you, and you put heavy metal music in, what's going to happen? That heavy metal music drives everything out that you're thinking about because the music is so intense, it forces your brain to fire into a different pattern. And because of that, you can let all that trauma go. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better now. And I've had clients love going in mosh pits. If people don't know what mosh pits are, it's like you go down in front of the stage and then everybody's kind of like pushing and shoving each other around in there. And sometimes people get bruises and get hurt in mosh pits. But I've also had people with PTSD tell me they love mosh pits. And it's the same thing. It's like all this intensity of input drives out all the horrible trauma that you're experiencing and you feel better. Now, most of us would feel worse. We would feel enlivened or we would feel agitated if we listened to heavy metal. So, what you bring to the situation, what you bring to the music makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you would think that you would want to listen to the opposite kind of music to what your current state or emotional state is. Like, for example, you're too amped up, so you don't want to listen to calm music, or you're too calm, so you want to get amped up with some, heavy metal or hip hop or whatever. But after listening to what you said, it's almost like we usually with music, we want to dive deeper into the emotion that we're currently experiencing. So, for example, like when my mom died, I wasn't listening to calming music. That, like, again, that was sort of offensive. I was listening to this sort of sad music, or maybe it could be angry music, or it could be whatever you're feeling at the time, or you're already, all charged up and working out. You don't listen to calm music to balance yourself out. That feels weird. You don't want that opposition. You want to dive fully into that experience and just be immersed in that experience. And it seems like almost to get that immersion, to get that presence, you have to just go into whatever you are at the moment. And then I guess things change afterwards. Maybe you get over it and you burn the fire out, and then it calms down. I don't know, but there seems to be that's sort of what seems more satisfying to me as well. But in the beginning, it sounds a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah, I think it's such a great observation. Like when we go to funerals, we don't play, like Don't Worry, Be Happy, right? We play sad music because I think it tells us that it validates what we're experiencing. There's this beautiful classical music piece called Pavane for a Dead Princess. And, you know, we've had many, many songs through the ages written like this, and they're very poignant and sad. And I think they tell us, like, this is life and what you're experiencing is real. And we're validating this very human experience of sadness. Now, if you're still stuck there a year later, maybe we're like, yeah, so maybe you need to quit listening to that song because for some reason you got stuck there. But I think this is a very, very important part of our lives. And isn't it interesting? Like, we play music. Music is huge at weddings, music is huge at funerals, music is huge at all these important transitional parts in life. And I think it is an emanation of who we are. And the other thing I'll say about this, because it does, this sort of counterintuitive thing, is So I'll talk about insomnia a little bit. If you can't sleep because you're like ruminating over and over and you're thinking like, oh, I have to get the car fixed and this person's mad at me at work and, my partner's being an asshole to me. And, and then you think all those thoughts through again and again and again. And you're like, oh, I just should put on some like beautiful ambient music. Well, you put on beautiful ambient music, it's not going to stop you ruminating, right? Those frequencies are too far away from where your brain is. So people will say to me, like, well, I really feel bad because I have to watch TV to fall asleep. Or when I'm on my phone, I'll fall asleep and I know I'm not supposed to be on my phone. And I'm like, actually, that's telling you a lot. What it's telling you is your brain needs some input in order to bring it down from these higher frequencies down into these lower frequencies. It can't get down there by itself. So you have to step it down. So if you have insomnia and you realize this, like maybe you need to step your music down too, like you listen to something that's engaging enough. So one of the things in this Calm the Storm album is every song has a melody, and people are like, well, why would you have melodies? It's like, because if you can't sleep, your brain needs to be engaged by something. Does that even make sense to you? Because otherwise, it's just going to spin wherever it is. It needs something else to focus on. And as it focuses on that, it starts to lead it down this path that it needs to go in order to calm down. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but, a lot of people have. And I think that's why some of the relaxing music when you're on hold is not the best. Or if you're at a funeral, you don't want to listen to happy, great, the world has no issues. It's kind of insulting. So you want to catch the brain where it is and then help it move into the optimal state.
Yeah, it's insulting. It's confusing. It's a bit isolating. Like I don't belong here in this musical world. Who and with the other people too. You kind of puts you into your head. But then when you are listening to the music that feels right, that matches your emotional and physiological state, then it's like this connector too. So it's this validation that I'm not alone. And like I noticed on some YouTube videos of you playing some live concerts, and there's this moment, a couple moments where you start looking at the guitarist and smiling, and you're alone there on your pipe organ or guitar or whatever, but then you're still together with him. And, even if he doesn't see you, it's like almost like he also feels you. And then there's an audience and there's all this going on. And if you're at the funeral and they're playing this music, if they were playing "Be Happy," whatever that song is, some happy song, maybe everyone would just be like in a collective state of confusion and disconnected. But when everyone's sort of leaning into the actual experience of the reality of what it is, it kind of connects you together. And maybe it's not about, maybe it's regardless of this point of whether you're listening to music that's contradictory or matching. But regardless, music has this beautiful like connecting element, and it's like a real connection that makes you smile. And like you were smiling there at Calum, and that was a beautiful thing.
It was so interesting after that concert with Callum. People were like, man, you guys have some kind of connection and there's some sort of like union there. And you see this among musicians when you really don't even, it's cool when the audience gets to see you looking at each other, but you feel it even when you're not looking at each other. It's like you're sort of become a unit, like you're kind of inside each other's heads or brains, or I don't know what to call it, each other's systems in some way. And, when I was a teenager, I actually played the organ at funerals. And, that was really weird to do as a teenager because what do I know about this stuff? But I got so many lovely comments from people. And I think part of it was when you become a partner in grief with someone and music is that bridge. Oh, I'm getting chills talking about this. There's something very profound that happens, right? That kind of partnership and connection through music to what people are experiencing, especially through grief or pain. There's something, I mean, transcendent. It just comes down to that word to me. And When you hear people say this, like, it meant everything to me to hear you play at the funeral. Wow. You know, that's just so moving.
And then when they listen to this music later, they will probably consciously or unconsciously remember this connection with the other people, all of that. There's certain times in my life where I create these little playlists for myself. Like there's like the mother's death playlist. There's brothers in Thailand. That's what's called, brothers in Thailand. And it's me and my this past summer, me and my they're like, hey, we're coming out to Asia. I'm like, Asia, okay, where are we going? And we went to Thailand this summer, and we stayed in this sort of this jungle kind of area. And a core part of that whole experience was music, and we were playing all this music, and we just save it all in a playlist. And now when I listen back on especially certain songs, it really re-triggers that connection with my brothers and with the nature there, etc. So it's kind of fun too to, this is kind of a random little tangent, but have little playlists. They're in our brain anyway, but to actually deliberately create them, and like, oh, this is a playlist from high school. This is a playlist from when I was 12 years old, and it can be kind of fun to tap back into that experience, or deep moments in your life, like when you got married, or whenever you unfortunately went to jail or something, or you were addicted on cocaine or whatever. Like, I don't know, just kind of interesting. Like, oh, okay, I remember that. Maybe I shouldn't remember that one, but they're all kind of worth remembering. And music kind of helps us get those memories back.
That's exactly right. And I can tell you why. We know somewhat of why is that music entrains the emotional centers of the brain, right? So it goes straight into our limbic system where emotions get created. And then there was research done starting in the late 70s, maybe earlier, where what it shows is that when your emotional centers are activated, you have a better memory. And so when you play music that activates the emotional centers of the brain, you actually do remember things better. And that's one reason that why people, if you need to memorize information and you memorize it to music, you'll remember it way, way better than just trying to memorize it without music. So it's huge. And, that's interesting because I remember like at I don't know, some junior high sock hop or something, they played this song of sort of Beatles era, and I had this crush on this boy, Brian. And when I hear that song, I go right back there. I mean, it's so interesting. I never think of this until I hear that song play. And then it's like, oh, Brian, I was 12 years old. I had a crush on him. I mean, it's very powerful. Think about that. It's just huge. So I think using this deliberately, like if you're having a bad day and you're like, oh man, I'm going to click the Thailand playlist on, and you can just, it takes you there. And it's like, oh, yeah, today isn't everything in my life, right? There was Thailand. It was beautiful. There's probably more in my future. I mean, it's a beautiful use of music.
It's interesting too, though, because I will go back to some of these playlists, and during the moment, there could be this very deep emotion to it. You might be crying, for example. Like I said, some of the songs of there's not an actual playlist called "Mom Dying." I just can't title it that, but I know what songs they are. And there was a certain song, for whatever reason, it popped up during that time. It wasn't a song I was deliberately searching for, but it popped up somehow, and it fit. It fit. I just kept listening to it. But every time I listened to it, it was like a tool where I could just start crying. It would just make me cry. So wow, that's fascinating. Why am I pushing this cry button? But this music will get me there to crying. I know it'll do it with 95% accuracy. But now I listen to it, it doesn't make me cry anymore. But it's like this connection to that experience, that grief or whatever, but also this distance from it. So that's an interesting kind of thing too. It makes it less sad. It's almost like it creates this objectivity, but also puts you back into the subjective moment too. So it's a weird kind of balance between, it captures the emotion, but kind of it could slightly distance you from it, maybe decreasing the over intensity of something from the past, so some trauma, for example, or something.
Yeah, why do you think that worked in your case? Do you have a theory?
I might have just literally been listening to that song when I got the message from my sister, like, oh, mom died. And it just might have just been that, like, it just got seared into my brain, like this song killed my mom or something. I don't know. Or it could just be the song had a kind of sad kind of tone to it, and it just matched my feeling. Like whatever these guys playing this music were feeling or pretending to feel when they made it, I feel like I was feeling the same thing too. So maybe there's also this connection between the musician and the listener. You're you're feeling what they're feeling, and I wonder what would happen. Maybe it's you've measured it, or people have. What's going on in the brain of the musician at the time of recording versus the brains of the people listening to it years later or something, and there might be some kind of syncing up kind of thing going on. So I maybe they just felt what I was feeling, and we just matched, and it did it. But it could also be like that Pavlovian thing of like, oh, that's a song when I felt that intense emotion.
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know of any studies where people have looked like what are the brains of the musicians doing, and then 10 years later, what are the brains of the listeners doing, and are they syncing up? That would be really cool to do. What I'm going to guess is that over time, the reason why the song that first made you cry then didn't make you cry, but sometimes these can almost become comforting reminders. you know, if you've had a really bad breakup with somebody and then like 5 or 10 years later, you look at their picture again and you're like, yeah, the breakup sucked, but there actually were some beautiful moments in this relationship. And I treasure those moments. So I think what happens is over time, well, one thing is music can desensitize you. So in desensitization, what you do is you expose yourself to the same thing over and over, bad thing usually over and over. And as you expose it over and over, you tell this story over and over, the emotional centers of your brain start to get used to it. And so they don't activate as much. And so you get desensitized to it. And it becomes a memory instead of an experience. So it's like, oh, yeah, I remember I used to fly airplanes in Alaska. So I remember when I crashed my airplane and I was completely traumatized. And this bush pilot came up to me and he was like, yeah, it feels really bad now, but eventually it's just going to be an interesting story. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is horrible, blah, blah, blah. Well, now it's an interesting story. I mean, he was totally right because I became desensitized. Over time, the emotional centers of my brain calmed down. And so the more you tell this story, the more it becomes a story and not a reliving of an emotional experience. So I would guess, like with your mom, that's what happens. And eventually that song may become very comforting to you, where it's like, wow, this is a remembrance of my beautiful mom and part of the transition of her life.
Well, but even then it was comforting. That was it's sort of like how the heavy metal is comforting these people somehow. Same kind of deal. I was like, oh, okay, I'm here.
Well, yeah, like, and why do we have breakup songs? Like, breakup songs are super popular because it's comforting. I mean, it's comforting to know, yeah, this is how I'm feeling. And maybe when you listen to a breakup song, you realize other people have had this experience too, and life goes on. And, I think music has, especially lyrics, like, I always find lyrics really interesting because let's go for a breakup song, there's usually something like how you did me wrong or how life goes on or I will survive or something like that. And so the lyrics themselves validate like this is horrible, but also there's a way out. Those lyrics I think are so powerful.
Yeah, not to make this about heavy metal, but then it also explains heavy metal a little bit too, because the lyrics from those songs are very different from the lyrics you get in a lot of other genres. I don't know if you've thought about that or noticed it, but I'm sure it's quite obvious.
Yeah, and rap music is interesting too. I think the thing about a lot of rap music, and especially early on, it was very validating for people like, this is my experience and this is my culture, and I'm going to claim it. And I'm not going to let anybody take that away from me. That's important. I think if you get stuck in that state, probably psychologically, in these negative states, it isn't good. But it's important to feel like, yeah, your reality matters. You're not just like a little ant on this earth and we don't care about what your life experience is. So yeah, I think lyrics are very important. I did have you have to watch out though. If you listen too much to certain things, it'll start to kind of color the way you look at the universe, and maybe you don't want that. So I think one thing about the intensity of this music is you want to think about dosing how much you want to dose yourself with it, because pretty soon if you start looking at the world through that lens, it might not be too accurate.
Yeah, no, and like with heavy metal, for example, is very uplifting and in a way positive, but it gives you this courage, like fight the battle, the war's going on, you're going to win, you're strong. That might lead to you actually being a bit aggressive, etc. But it's probably better than listening to like gangster rap or talking about shooting people or something. But maybe that's what you need. Who knows?
Yeah, I think, maybe when we feel aggressive feelings and we express them through music, that's a lot better than expressing them physically, right? So if you can sing about them and then you want to kind of validate that and then you kind of want to move on to something more productive. I think the power of heavy metal is so interesting. I've actually was listening to heavy metal the last few days, and there's something so I guess I just say powerful about it. Like to feel that power, there's something really wonderful about that, and the edginess of the distorted guitar and these things that are really overwhelming. And it's one thing I love about the pipe organ. Oddly enough, you don't think about pipe organ and heavy metal going together, but when you pull all the stops on a pipe organ and you're just like you can just crash chord, you can make like these total heavy. Listen to Anna Lapwood on YouTube, some of her heavy duty pipe organ stuff. It's unbelievable. And there's something I was thinking the other day, like, why do I like to do that? It's like it gives me a feeling of agency, like I'm in control, I'm powerful, I can make these huge sounds. There's something super cool about that.
And you play the pipe organ, you play the guitar, you probably play some other instruments. How is the experience different? I know you haven't measured your brain during these times, but you know intuitively. How does it feel? What is the difference between playing the pipe organ versus the guitar versus I don't know? You've probably played around on the drums or something.
That's a question no one's asked me before. I love that question. I got to think about that a minute. Well, it is a different feeling. There's something about the guitar. The thing about the guitar is you hold the guitar, especially the acoustic guitar. And I haven't played electric guitar. I got to play that. It's be cool. But when you hold an acoustic guitar and you strum it, do you play acoustic guitar? Have you ever held one?
Yeah, I played the guitar a lot. That was sort of my best friend, I guess, in high school. And then I kind of like, we're still friends, but we haven't hung out in a couple decades.
Maybe it's time to renew your acquaintanceship.
No, after preparing for this interview and listening to your music and watching your YouTube and talking right now, it does get me excited to, don't be a cheap ass. Just buy a freaking guitar. It'll pay itself off after like a week probably.
Oh, totally. It totally will. The thing is, when you hold the guitar and you strum the guitar, and if you have a semi decent guitar, you'll feel the guitar vibrating. And it's like you're holding this vibrating, warm, alive instrument. I mean, there's something very intimate, I think, about the guitar compared to something like a keyboard where it's sitting out there and your fingers are on top of it. So the guitar, you're cradling it and you really, really feel it. And when you pluck a string, a bass note string, the sort of warm resonance of the guitar, the timbre of the guitar is incredible. So I think it is different. And that's such a cool question. I'm really going to have to think about this some more. I think with the pipe organ, because the music is coming from the pipes, it's not coming from you. Right. So when I press a key on the pipe organ, the music is coming out of a pipe that might be 25 or 30 feet away. So it's a really different experience. These frequencies are raining down on you from up above you. And so, yeah, it is a very different experience. I mean, they're both just mind boggling. I feel so lucky. The other day I was practicing the organ and I was just like, oh man, I'm so lucky I get to come in and do this and just experience all this richness that can happen with the pipe organ. Whereas other individual instruments, they're more limited, right? Like an oboe, I used to play oboe. I love the oboe. It makes a beautiful, beautiful sound. But a pipe organ makes an oboe sound, it makes a flute sound, it makes a brass sound, it makes there's all these different and then you can do all combinations. So I call it my DAW. You know what a DAW is? A digital audio workstation, a synthesizer. And I call the pipe organ my AW, my acoustic audio workstation, right? It's all acoustic. And so you get this huge range of frequencies hitting your body and your ears. It's really amazing. If anybody gets to go actually get up close to a pipe organ, take the opportunity.
It's interesting. We know that dogs and pets can be comforting for people who are alone or grieving or whatever. A lot of homeless people have dogs for obvious reasons. But then again, you'd start looking at homeless people, or not just them, but people who are maybe alone, or they're having some kind of mental challenge at the moment. The guitar seems to be one of the more popular instruments, maybe because the portability of it, but also maybe maybe you don't have to get a dog, just get a guitar.
Yeah, it doesn't eat as much, that's for sure. I mean, it'd be way cheaper in the long run. Yeah, so the two most popular instruments are guitar and piano. And the thing I love about guitar now, and pipe organ, I mean, pipe organ's a horrible instrument to choose. For one, it's incredibly hard to play. And for two, it's not portable at all. You cannot, I mean, at least a piano you can buy and have in your house. But when you think about it, the guitar is such a beautiful instrument because of that. I went to Europe last spring and I hauled my guitar around with me the whole time, and I didn't have a piano, I didn't have an organ, I didn't, but every day I had my guitar. It's so beautiful. And I think for some reason the timbres of the guitar and the timbres of the piano are things that people find. The piano's much more percussive. And it has a brighter sound. Unless you're playing electric guitar, but let's just talk about acoustic guitar. So, yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea. And, music therapists, people who actually create music with people or hum with them or have them listen to certain types of music or move to music, know this very well. Certain things like the guitar, people respond to very positively.
It's interesting how certain genres of music are born or they explode in popularity at certain times in history. It could be due to some social, cultural things going on, or the economy, or politics, or the technology of the time, or some kind of rebellion to what's going on prior to or at that moment. And, you could think of like, okay, blues, that makes sense. Metal, what gave birth to metal? Why is K-pop popular now? All of these questions, and I know you can't go through the history of music, but it'd be cool to hear your thoughts on certain pieces of this history, and your ideas on, oh, well, maybe this is what gave birth to this genre, or this is what exploded this one into popularity. It kind of tells you, it's a little sign of the times.
Yeah. I mean, I think you already kind of said it. Now, I have no idea really, so I'm just talking. So take it for what it's worth, which probably is not very much. I think there's a couple things that go on. One is music as sort of a social thing, but then there's what musicians bring to the table. So musicians tend to always be pushing the edge of something, right? Because you learn how to play all the Beatles songs, and then you're like, yeah, that was really, now I'm bored. So what can I do next? And then you invent the next thing. And then I think and then other people are like, oh, we're looking for novelty. Like our brains are bored too. So we're looking for something novel. So this is cool. And you see this back in classical music, like Mozart, everybody was like, wow, or Rachmaninoff, or some of these other people, like when they first played their songs, people were like, this is terrible. This is the worst music in the world. And then over time, they were like, oh, actually, this is pretty cool stuff, because we want novelty, but not too much novelty. So you see that. I think that would be one element, that musicians are always looking for the next most interesting thing. And then the other thing I think is a little bit more, I don't know, maybe human, I would say. Like, think about pop songs. So, we always have pop songs. And what is it about pop songs that we like? The tunes are simple, like AI can make amazing pop songs. The tunes are simple, the lyrics are simple, they're all about love and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's because when we want to kind of groove and we want to be happy and we don't want to be thinking too hard, like pop songs do that. And we've always had this kind of genre in music, and I think we'll have it, that exists independently from everything else. And musicians, I mean, a lot of musicians that play pop songs don't even like pop songs, but they're trying to make a living, right? So they're like, well, I know if I write a pop song, people will come and listen to it. And there's a recipe for pop songs, just like there's a recipe for romance novels. Like if you like to read romance novels or action novels or go to action movies or rom-coms, you know exactly what's going to happen, right? In a rom-com, like there's going to be two people, they're attracted to each other, and then there's some sort of disruption, and then it all turns out fine in the end. Like, why do we go? We go because we know that. Or an action movie, why do we go see Marvel movies? Like, we go because we know there's good guys and bad guys, and the good guys are going to win. And we're seeking out that message. Like, we like that message. It makes us feel better about the world. So we're seeking these out. Pop music's kind of like that to me. And I think that exists separate from like film as a genre, right? Where you have filmmakers going like, well, wow, I want to push the edge of what filmmaking can be. That's a little bit different. So I think that's a couple of variables. And then what else is going on in history? Like, you have the Watts riots and you have protest songs over the Vietnam War or during World War II. You have these patriotic songs. And this is really a form of either rebellion or a way of convincing ourselves that what we're doing is right. And so there's very political uses to music. And people have written about this. And that's both good and bad, right? Like military marches or national anthems, they're both good and bad. They create a tribal sense, which makes us feel like we belong to something. That part is good. To the extent that they make us think everyone else is evil, maybe that's bad. Lots of different factors, I think.
And music can have different effects on the brain, as we've been discussing. And your music specifically seems to have a certain effect of, yeah, there's a sort of transcendent feeling, but it's relaxing, it's calming. But my question there, regardless of whatever my intuition is what kind of effect were you trying to create, and how did you create that effect?
So the Calm the Storm album, I was really asking the question, can we create curated music to help with insomnia, chronic pain, and migraine? And the reason I chose those three is because they're overlapping brain networks. So when you have one of those things, you tend to have the other thing. If you have chronic pain, you tend to have insomnia, right? Like, it's hard to sleep when. So these networks in the brain are linked. And I thought, well, this is a good place to start. We're working on one for PTSD now. I hope we eventually get to do one for depression and focus and all this music will be very different. But let's say you're stuck in a state where you can't sleep well. And what that means is your brain is stuck on. So we want to bring your brain down into these lower frequencies. So what I did is I took all the elements of music, and I don't know how much detail you want to hear about this stuff, but there's different elements.
As much as you got.
As much as I got, we don't have that. We don't have 2 or 3 days. I tell you what, I love this workshop that I do called Music, the Brain and Healing. And it really goes through all this stuff, but it takes 2 days. It's a 1 to 2 day workshop and about what are the elements of music? How did they change the brain? How did they affect different conditions like ADHD and depression and anxiety and stroke and head injury and optimal training? I mean, all this stuff. It's so much fun to look at. But your question was really about this album. So let's say you can't sleep at night, your brain is stuck on, which means the neurons are firing too fast. So what we want to do is, because the brain mimics the music, we want to teach your brain, oh, your brain's kind of forgotten. It's supposed to slow down so you can go to sleep. So there's different elements to this. So one would just be tempo, right? So you play at 60, 70, 80 beats per minute, and your brain will be like, oh, I'm supposed to kind of like pace myself to that tempo. And that, I mean, if you look at any of the music, literature on music and the brain tempo, you'll see that everywhere. Tempo is really, really important. And there's caveats to that because you can actually play faster music because your brain will also pace to divisions or multiples of a certain tempo. But that starts to get into some of the details that we probably don't have time for. So there's tempo and then there's timbre. So timbre is the color of a sound. Like, I don't think you would want to listen to a lullaby played by a piccolo, or even though it's the exact same notes, or a lullaby played by a trumpet. You want to listen to a lullaby played by a guitar or an oboe or a beautiful lyrical human voice. And so timbre is the color of a sound. And so, the warmth and intimacy of the guitar combined with these deep sounds of the pipe organ, these sort of deep sounds that sort of cradle you. So, those timbres, the brain's like, oh, I'm hearing these timbres that I associate with calming. So, that's another one. And then there's phrasing. So, phrase in music is like a human sentence. So, if I talk like this, you're going to find it weird, right? Because it's very disruptive. So when you have a melody, you don't want your melody to be going like that. You want your melody to have this beautiful sort of lyrical phrasing. And Peppino D'Agostino, the music partner that did these compositions, the guy's just so brilliant at this. And so, when you listen to these melodies, they just flow in this beautiful pacing. So that's like the phrasing. That's another variable. And then there's 6 or 7 other ones, but those are some of the major ones that we think about. I guess I'll mention one more, and that is how many high notes or low notes you have, right? So you don't necessarily want to go too high. And when we were working on this, we would take these melodies, and I actually like looked at an oscilloscope to see how high the frequencies were going, because when you play a note on the guitar, you have what they call the fundamental frequency, which is the actual note. But then it's actually, how a guitar doesn't sound like a sine wave? A sine wave is very clear, right? A guitar has a certain warmth to it, and it's because it's making other waves on top of what they call the fundamental frequency. And so, but I didn't want those to be going too high. So we would like play a note, look at the oscilloscope, see how high the harmonics were going. And so, a bunch of different elements like this. I think I had I'm writing a chapter about this right now, and I think I came up with 7 or 8 of these different elements. And so that's how we constructed it. So not only are you getting tempo, you're getting timbre, you're getting phrasing, you're getting harmonics, you're getting all this other input in, and all that input is normalizing your brain. And I think it's interesting, like your comment about having a spiritual experience. I think for some people, when your brain goes into this state, it opens up to other sources of information, right? Like it becomes more sensitive and more open to what's going on out there. I mean, for other people, I'm sure not so much. Not everybody's going to like this music.
How about people with, you mentioned ADHD, PTSD. I know we can't get into all the mental health conditions, but some of these, bipolar, for example, what kind of music do these people like, or what music might help them? Again, this is probably a 8-hour course or something at least, but yeah, well, we can maybe scratch the surface.
Yeah, it's so fun to talk about. So I love, most of the research on music in the brain is in its infancy. So when I tell you about these studies, most of them are small studies. They haven't been replicated, but nonetheless, they're really interesting. And one of them I really love is this study on kids with ADHD. And they took kids without ADHD and kids with ADHD, and they had them read a passage and then answer comprehension questions, to see if they remembered what was in the passage. And so the kids with ADHD, so they played some of them music, some of them upbeat music, some of them music with lyrics and music without lyrics. So they got all these different combinations. Well, basically, what happened is the kids with ADHD, their reading comprehension went up when they had music, higher than when there was no music. The kids without ADHD, their reading comprehension either went the same or went down when they listened to music. And so music is having a differential effect. And you hear this from people all the time. Like some people are like, man, I can't listen to music when I'm studying because I just start listening to the music and it distracts me from my studying. And other people are like, oh, I totally have to listen to music when I'm studying because having that go on in the background helps me focus. And so, I mean, to me, that's just such a fascinating finding. And if I were a teacher and I had a bunch of kids in my classroom with ADHD, I'd get headphones and be like, listen to music, like, see if this helps you, so you quit flailing around in your seat so much, right? You have this music going on to help, and it seems to help focus attention. So that's really interesting. People that are depressed, there's some studies where they gave people a playlist to listen to, and it actually decreased their depression between 40 and 50%. And I always think about this because music is so cheap, right? Like, I mean, you can get on our website, which is musicandhealing.net, if anybody wants to read about this stuff further, and pay $20 to download these songs. It's like, if you're depressed, why wouldn't you do that? It's way cheaper than medication. There's no side effects. And I'm not saying this is the right music if you're depressed. I want to clarify that. I think you need different music. But the general idea that music is cheap, is accessible, you can listen to it over and over. So I've had some clients with insomnia listen through this album 3 times a day and they start sleeping. And it's like, wow, that's cool. You wouldn't take a sleeping pill 3 times a day, would you? But you can listen to this music and it's really not going to hurt you. And it's cheap. And that's what I think is so great about music. So music and depression, that's to me a very interesting finding. If you're depressed and you make yourself a playlist of music that acknowledges your depression, but also makes you feel just a little bit better, that can be really, really helpful. And that harkens back, I think, to what you said about your mom, your experience with your mom's passing and how you use music to both acknowledge and then kind of move on from that. So interesting. And then head injury is really, I think, a fascinating area and ripe for music because remember when we were talking earlier, certain genres of music activate different parts of your brain. So let's say you've had a stroke in one certain part of your brain, and we know which genre helps activate that part of your brain. You listen to that type of music, and it helps your brain. And I've actually had a client with stroke who we did this kind of intervention with, and it really did help him. Again, there's not a ton of studies on this. There are a few studies on this, but I think it's a really cool area because we know music. It's very activating. And I want to go back to that study for a minute where they had the guy talk, giving a speech. Compared to processing speech, music takes up way more activating chemicals in your brain. It's much more activating than speech, which is also very interesting to think about. So if you have a stroke and you want to stimulate your brain, you're probably better off listening to music than watching somebody on TV, unless they're playing music.
And you mentioned some people like to listen to music while they're studying or working, etc., and some people don't. And the first thing that popped in my head there was, well, does it have vocals? Are there lyrics or are there not? Because in my case, like if there's a single lyric of the language I know, it could be like Icelandic or something. That's fine, but English or Japanese or something, I can't focus. I don't know what state it's going to put me in. It could be a relaxing state or help me with my grief or trauma or whatever, but it's not going to help me focus or study. So yeah, what are the role of lyrics versus no lyrics, vocals, no vocals in the kinds of effects this music might produce?
Yeah, I love your questions, and we don't have good data on this yet. It would be so cool to do a study, wouldn't it, with like lyrics, same song, lyrics, same song, no lyrics, same song, different lyrics, right? Different types of lyrics. I mean, that would be a super cool study to see. It's interesting in that ADHD song, the difference between the lyrics and the no lyrics was not statistically significant. But I've heard that for most people. And I think it also depends on who you are. Like, I was talking to a musician friend of mine the other day, and this guy's like at the virtuosic level, and he's like, "Oh, I can't stand to go into a restaurant where they're playing music because my mind just goes to the music and I can't listen to conversation. I can't, I have to stay out of there." Well, his brain is so attuned from years and years and years of listening to music that it just goes there. Whereas most of us gate that music out, right? Like we actually aren't consciously processing it. We can focus on the conversation. So, yeah, I don't think we know a lot about lyrics. I feel like the content of lyrics separate from the music is really important. So, I've had clients that, I feel like the lyrics of music is basically kept them alive. It's sort of these where you get these what I call kind of anthem songs, like life is terrible, but I can survive this. That's so important. And we have many songs like this. We even have songs. I find the song Amazing Grace really interesting because Amazing Grace has been around for a long time and it's sung not just in religious settings, it's sung in pop settings, it's sung in other settings, even though it came out of the religious tradition. And why is this? There's something so I think the lyrics of that, like I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. I mean, these lyrics speak to so much of our human experience, and it also gives us hope. And then, of course, the construction of the melody of some of these songs that have lasted for generations is just beautiful. But I think these lyrics are very important.
It's really fun to make music, even if you suck at it. If you can get into that brain state where it's coming out. Like, I'm not a musician, but the past few months of this podcast, I've been playing around with my intros and making music. Why do I do this? I don't know, but it puts me in a very special brain state that I don't know how to get anywhere else. It's this. I'm playing. I guess I'm playing. I'm joking around. But it's very playful, open. Again, like you said, like I'm kind of making the music, but I'm kind of not. I'm just like waiting to see what emerges. And at the end, I'm like, wow, that was so fun just to play around in that thing, that land, and what the hell just happened. But it's hard to get into that brain state. But I guess there's 2 points here. One is like it's a special feeling, and maybe it's we're trying to exercise or move certain parts of our brain that we just can't activate otherwise. There might be other ways. Maybe if I played sports, that would be okay. I don't know, but I don't. So making this or trying to make this music is very, very satisfying, but also very hard. And it's also hard to get into the state. For me, it takes time. I'm like sitting there, and then just kind of I start to like let go and I start playing around and things start coming out. But the question here is, how do you prepare, I guess, your body, your mind, whatever, so that you can get into that brain state of being able to produce music?
Well, let me back up and answer a slightly different question that I think is so important that you brought up in your example, which is that most of us should be musicians and most of us should be artists and most of us should be writers. And what we have to do is we have to get rid of that hat of this performance hat that somehow it has to sound good or it has to read beautifully or it has to, if we're drawing, that the drawing has to look good. And Pepino and I did this retreat along with another colleague of mine about finding your authentic self using these different creative experiences in a non-performance based, low pressure environment. So if you just hum, right? So we know humming activates the vagus nerve, which helps regulate the body. So if you just let yourself hum whatever you want to hum, like it's a beautiful experience. Who cares? You're not trying to, you know, win a contest. You're just humming. And that I think in some ways is the most beautiful creative act you could ever do. Or you just let yourself scribble on the piece of paper, or you just write words down that you like. This is how you become a true emanation of who you are in this moment or who you can be in this moment. And I think that's why you start to get this feeling, this beautiful feeling of like, wow, like something's different, like I'm becoming like something as you use the words letting loose, like it's just great, like something's letting loose, like I'm expanding, I'm becoming a more expansive version of myself. And we've turned music into an industry and into a performance based thing and other things too, dance, all these other things. But what if you could just get up and dance and nobody cared? Like, moving your body in this way would be so freeing. So I really would encourage people to do that. Like, just hum. It's wonderful. Just let yourself hum, and you'll notice something is going to happen. Or just let yourself doodle. These are beautiful, beautiful emanations of who we are as people in this world.
Yeah, and you'd imagine that hum starts to become a bigger hum, and maybe a couple words start popping in, and eventually, I guess if you keep doing it regularly, it'll probably get better.
Who cares if it even gets better? Maybe you just hum and it sounds weird. I have a friend and she's like, I love to sing, but I only sing in the car by myself because I'm tone deaf and I drive everybody else crazy. But when I'm on road trips, I just love to sing. And I'm like, oh man, that's too bad you're driving everybody else crazy. Like, isn't it wonderful? Like, you're singing, you're expressing yourself, you're having this great experience. Who cares? Like, you're not going to be an opera singer. So neither am I, you know? We have to get rid of that.
I was about to go down this path of like, look at some amazing musician, like look at Queen or Aretha Franklin on stage, like just letting it out and feeling being alive, and you're like, wow, how amazing would it feel to be like them? But then now to your point, maybe that is how maybe you're already there. Maybe when you're humming, you are Freddie Mercury in your room, and that feels really good.
Yeah, you're like singing in the shower, you know? Like another like a funny example of that is my voice isn't that great, but sometimes when I'm all by myself in a church because I get to go in and practice the pipe organ, like these beautiful resonant spaces, and I'll just like sing, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so cool! Like, no one will ever hear this. Does it matter? I mean, it's changing me. It's helping me experience something that I'll never, I can't get any other way. That's the beauty of this stuff.
So there is that mindset shift of like just stop caring about it being good, and just do it, just feel it, whatever, hum. But then, is there anything else in terms of I know diet and sleep and all these things are going to be solely individual. Sleep probably less so. But are there any things like that, environmental things, etc., that help get you in there?
Well, I'll tell you, I think performing's very different, right? I think people that are really, really, really good performers, which I am not, but Pepino, who spent tens of thousands of hours performing in front of people, they view it as a way of sharing and connecting with people. And that's actually what I felt I felt that during that concert. You can kind of tell, like, I actually screwed up the end of one song and I just start laughing. It's like, it didn't matter, right? Like, here we are, we're all friends, and I kind of had that feeling to it. And I think really great performers go into that space routinely. And it's just, that's when the magic happens. And how do you prepare yourself for that? I think, you realize that mistakes only matter so much, right? It's the sharing of this beautiful sound and these beautiful songs that are so important. And when you get past yourself, then the magic happens. When you're caught up in yourself, like, oh, I didn't play that note right, or oh, this sucks, then the magic can't happen. So you have to move out of that state. And I think for me, the times I've been most successful doing that are times when I quit. I really prompted myself, like, okay, this might not be the best, but I'm the person that can share this, like nobody else. It's sort of like playing at those funerals. Like, I'm not the best pipe organist in the world, but I can give somebody a beautiful, comforting experience. Like, how nice is that? And so I think when I carry that mindset in, instead of thinking like, oh, I missed this note, or oh, this passage is hard, will I get, that's all distracting crap. So that, I think, is the way to prepare yourself.
And there are big similarities, but also differences between live music, performing it, watching it, versus listening to recorded music or just recording music in your studio. Maybe common sense, but you might have some extra ideas on this. What are some of the differences between live versus recorded music for the performer, but also the listener?
Yeah, I think two things. And I want to just finish on this other topic. First is, like, we're sitting here having a conversation. If we were thinking about every word we were going to say and like saying, "Oh, do I sound stupid?" Like, nobody would want to listen to that. When we really connect and start having this live conversation, that's when the magic happens. Even if some of the stuff we say is stupid or we, and a little bit, it doesn't matter. So it's true across these genres. Like you and I are having some kind of connection here. It's beautiful.
And sometimes I look down at my sheet music slash aka my notes, and that kind of takes me out of the experience a little bit, but it helps to have that sheet music there to follow the tune. But then it does feel better and it gets you more into flow, and it gets more creates more magic when you do just let go of this paper or that paper. But again, it's a weird balance.
It's kind of maybe some of both, right? You have to balance these things out. Yeah, because you have to remind yourself, "Oh, here's where I'm at." Like, and you do that in music too. Like, sometimes I play along in music and I'm like and it's happening automatically, and then I'm like, "Oh, crap, where am I?" Like, I've forgotten, and it's like, "Oh, shoot, I have to find my place in this song." And then sometimes I have to reorient to what's going on, and it's sort of like this, like, oh, it's really nice to have that music sitting up there so I can remember what comes next. But now I forgot the question you asked me.
Oh, the question was music versus recorded music.
Oh, yeah. Well, two big variables. One is true live music. Well, I'm going to maybe talk about live music without speakers. So you're sitting in the living room, Peppino's playing the acoustic guitar to you. Nothing like it. All the natural frequencies are there. He's sitting 6 feet from you. The physiological connection is there. There's nothing that can replace that. When you get into bigger crowds where you have speakers, any kind of speaker is going to kind of limit the frequencies that hit you. And so it's if you're in guitar, if it's a band, for example, you get some limited frequency sort of cutoffs there, and that's why people buy these really great big speakers that can really get the bass sounds out and all that kind of stuff. So I think that would be like second best. The thing you have going for you in situations like that is you have the crowd. And that's I think the beauty of live music, and especially they had a big country music concert a few weeks back in with the big country star in Idaho, where I'm from, and basically what people commented about after the concert was not the music. It was the crowd. They were like, we were all jamming together and we were all like having this big party and it was like the music created that, but it was the social experience that was so compelling to people. And they were like, oh, you want to do that again? So I think that social piece is just another huge part of live music, especially in venues like that. Maybe classical concerts were all like way too prim and proper, so we don't get that same crowd experience. I don't know. So I think those two things. I think recorded music. If you listen to this to our album with earbuds, you won't have the same sonic experience than you will if you listen to it with high quality earphones because they truncate the low and the high frequencies. And so that's the kind of downside to most of the way we listen to music. So, but it's still good, right? It's not like anything's bad here. It's just a matter of a different experience. So recorded music is a little bit different that way. And you don't have the person sitting in the room that you're starting to sync up with.
When or how did you get into all of this? Of course, music is a part of most humans' lives. So there's a long story of music, at least listening to it. But in terms of making music and making music specifically for the brain to create certain states, like helping people with anxiety or sleep or PTSD, etc. What's the story behind that?
Wow, it's kind of a long story, so I'm going to try to give you the short version. So I was a music major in college and I burnt out on that basically. And I was so lucky to find psychology. And then through psychology, I got into EEG. And then about 3 years ago, I had this weird experience where I just felt like I had to get back into music. And when I started getting back into music, I started thinking, oh my gosh, like how many people have this idea? Like I know about EEG, I know what the brain is doing. I think we could compose music. And I just got captured by this idea like, can we increase well being through music? And it really, in a way, is like a culmination of all these very, very different areas of expertise that I have. And when I actually did the first analyses on the data, if you're a researcher, this feeling. I looked at the results and I was just like, "Holy cow!" Except I didn't say "Holy cow," but I said something else. But I was like, "Oh man, like this actually worked!" Like, think about this: if you actually could use music, it's so cheap, it's so accessible. Like, this is such a powerful modality. We should all be doing this. And that's what's really driven me in this. And when I hear texts, like, I hope if anybody downloads this music and listen, you'll email or leave a comment about your experience, good or bad, with it, because I'm just fascinated by the power of music. And yeah, that's kind of the quick history.
And if people want to listen to your music, there are short little samples of it, and you can listen to each song for 10, 15 seconds. That's on your website, musicandhealing.net. You can also buy the music there. I think it's about $19.99 or something. Dollars at $20, not $2,000, and which is what it's actually worth.
Right. Yeah, but if anybody wants to pay, if anybody wants to pay $2,000, that'll really help. So go ahead.
Well, thanks again. This was a fun conversation. It was almost like making or listening to music. We got to get into that flow, just enjoy it, let go, which is the best kind of conversation and also the best kind of music. So thank you for helping bring me there, and hopefully the listeners as well.
You're very welcome, and it's such a pleasure. It's so fun to talk to you.